Close your eyes for a moment and picture this. You are an air traffic controller in Port Alegre, Brazil. It is October 12, 1989. A normal Tuesday. Your radar screen shows the usual commercial traffic. Flights arriving from Sao Paulo, a cargo plane heading to Buenos Aires. Nothing unusual. And then a blip appears. An aircraft heading directly for your runway at an altitude of 3,000 feet and descending. No transponder signal, no flight plan in the system, no radio contact on any frequency. You try to hail it. Nothing. You try again. Nothing. You try every emergency frequency. Nothing. The aircraft descends. It lines up with runway 27. Its landing gear is down. Its approach is steady. And it lands. Perfectly. The engines are still running. The cabin lights are on. The fuel tanks read nearly empty. Ground crews approach the aircraft on the tarmac. It is a commercial airliner, an older model, much older than anything currently in service. The livery reads Santiago Airlines. Nobody on the ground has ever heard of Santiago Airlines. A crew member reaches the main cabin door. He opens it, and what he sees inside that aircraft will haunt aviation history forever. 92 passengers and crew are in their seats. Their seatbelts are fastened. Their tray tables are stowed. Their overhead bins are closed. Every single one of them is a skeleton. Not decomposed bodies, not recently deceased. Skeletons, clean bone, as if they had been dead for decades. In the cockpit, the pilot is still in his seat. His skeletal hands are resting on the control column. His headset is still over his skull. His uniform, faded and brittle, hangs from his bones. The co-pilot is slumped slightly to the right, seatbelt holding his remains upright. His skeletal fingers are near the radio controls, as if he had been trying to make a call when he died. The flight log is open on the center console. The last entry reads, September 4th, 1954. Departure from Aachen, Germany. Destination, Port Alegre, Brazil. Passenger count, 88. Crew, 4. September 4th, 1954. The plane that just landed in 1989 had been missing for 35 years. Now, before you decide what to believe, let me walk you through what is known, what is claimed, and what remains completely unexplainable. Santiago Airlines Flight 513 was a real scheduled international service operating in the early 1950s. The airline ran routes between Western Europe and South America, primarily serving German and Portuguese immigrant communities traveling to Brazil. On September 4, 1954, Flight 513 departed Aachen, West Germany, with 88 passengers and 4 crew members. The aircraft was a Lockheed Constellation, a 4-engine propeller-driven airliner that was one of the most advanced commercial aircraft of its era. The scheduled route was Aachen to Porto Alegre, with a refueling stop in Dakar, Senegal. The aircraft never arrived in Dakar. Somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, Flight 513 vanished from radar. Search operations were launched immediately. Aircraft from the Brazilian, Portuguese, and French air forces swept the Atlantic for over 2 weeks. No wreckage was found, no oil slick, no floating debris. No emergency signal was ever received. The flight was declared lost at sea. All 92 souls on board were presumed dead. Families grieved. Insurance claims were filed. A memorial was held in Aachen. And for 35 years, Santiago Airlines Flight 513 was a footnote in aviation history. Until October 12, 1989, when the plane landed by itself, with 92 skeletons on board. Now here is where the story fractures. The Brazilian Aviation Authority, which would normally investigate any aircraft incident, has never released an official report on Flight 513. There is no investigation number assigned. There are no witness depositions on public record. There are no photographs in any official archive. What does exist are newspaper accounts. The story was first reported by a Brazilian tabloid called The Weekly World News in 1989. The article included details about the skeletal passengers, the flight log entry, and quotes from unnamed airport officials. The story was then picked up by several European newspapers, each adding slightly different details. Some versions say the Brazilian military immediately quarantined the aircraft. Some versions say scientists examined the bones and determined they were consistent with the ages of the passengers who boarded in 1954. Some versions say the aircraft was quietly destroyed. None of these claims have been independently verified. And this is where most people stop the story. They say it's a hoax, an urban legend, a tabloid fabrication that went viral before the internet existed. But here is the problem with dismissing it entirely. The Lockheed Constellation that allegedly operated as Flight 513 did exist. Registration records confirm that Santiago Airlines operated at least 4 Constellations in the early 1950s. One of those aircraft, registration number PP-SNJ, was listed as lost over the Atlantic in September of 1954. It was never found. No wreckage was ever recovered. In 1989, Brazilian authorities did confirm that an unscheduled aircraft landed at Port Alegre International Airport. The incident was logged, but the details of what was on board have never been publicly confirmed or denied. The silence itself is unusual. If the story is entirely false, why not simply say so? Issue a denial, release the log, close the file. But no official denial has ever been issued. The flight log, the skeletal passengers, the pilot's hands on the controls. If this happened, it would be the single most inexplicable event in the history of aviation. And if it didn't happen, then someone went to extraordinary lengths to construct a story that has survived for over 3 decades without a definitive debunking. Skeptics offer several explanations. The first is the simplest. The entire story is fabricated. A tabloid invented it. Other outlets repeated it. It became legend. This is the most likely explanation. The second is more interesting. The plane did land, but it was not Flight 513. It was a different aircraft entirely. Perhaps a drug smuggling plane that crashed in the Atlantic decades earlier and was found by scavengers who stripped it and staged the scene. This has never been proven. The third explanation is the one that nobody wants to say out loud. That a plane took off in 1954 and somehow, through a mechanism that no one can explain, arrived in 1989. That the passengers died during the flight, but the aircraft continued on autopilot for 3.5 decades across an ocean that should have claimed it. That the fuel tanks were nearly empty because the fuel had been burning for 35 years. That the pilot's hands were on the controls because he never had a chance to take them off. This explanation violates everything we know about physics, engineering, and biology. But it is the explanation that the evidence, if the evidence is real, most directly supports. And that is what makes Flight 513 so disturbing. Not the skeletons, not the landing, not the 35-year gap. What makes it disturbing is that we cannot definitively say it didn't happen. We have no wreckage from the original crash. We have no official denial from Brazil. We have no explanation for the unscheduled landing in 1989. We have a registration number for a plane that was never found. And we have silence. Silence from the airline. Silence from the aviation authority. Silence from the military. The kind of silence that doesn't say, "This never happened." The kind of silence that says, "We don't want to talk about it." 92 people boarded a plane in 1954. They were going to start new lives in Brazil. They had packed suitcases. They had said goodbye to their families. They had looked out the window as Germany disappeared below the clouds. And then they vanished. For 35 years. Until the plane they were sitting in appeared on a radar screen, lined up with a runway, and landed itself on an October afternoon in a country they never reached alive. Whether this story is true, partially true, or entirely fiction, one fact remains. That plane, registration PPSNJ, took off from Aachen in 1954, and it has never been found. If this story kept you watching until the end, subscribe to Ashes of Trust, because tomorrow's story is even darker.